Hey, it's Andrew Huang, and today we're going to talk about envelope followers, which is basically a little musical tool that tracks the volume of whatever you feed it with controls over how quickly it responds to the volume going up or down. And then you can use that shape of the resulting signal to control any parameter. We use the word envelope when talking about the shape of a signal because it's like it envelops the signal. So simple, so powerful. I'm gonna show you a bunch of use cases today, but also really slept on. In my research, I found that most DAWs don't even have an envelope follower, and you can do some stuff with third-party plugins, but it's limited in some ways. We'll get to that, but let's get right into it. We'll start with the basics. The first tip is that you can make the classic Autowah effect. Grab your envelope follower, grab an EQ. Gonna make this a low pass. Map the envelope follower to the frequency, and now you got this EQ responding to the dynamics of your playing, and you can adjust this to get a really pronounced effect. So, you know, two stock plugins here, and you have a better Autowah than any pedal because you can so finely tune it. Pedals obviously have advantages because they're easier to gig with and there's no latency, but just in terms of sound possibilities, like right here, you can dial it in exactly how you like. Tip number 2 is taking this principle and applying it to any effect so that it can be more dynamic. Let me show you some stuff on drums. This is what we'll put the effects on. Now I'm gonna put Transient 2 on this. Full disclosure, if you don't know, this is a plugin I created with Baby Audio, and we put an envelope follower mode in here because we knew it would be super fun. So it's a multi-effect with a macro control, and there's a few modes for that. If you click on this title bar, you can choose follower, and now all the parameters of these effects that are mapped to the macro will move in accordance to the signal generated by the envelope follower, which of course is coming from the volume of these drums. And you can do everything I'm showing you today without Transient. Just grab whatever effect you want and an envelope follower. But the workflow with envelope followers in Transient is great just because it's pre-mapped to all these different cool presets. It's very fun and it's on sale right now. So listen to what happens as I play with the detection knob, which is the sensitivity of the envelope follower. Some pretty unique effects, and this is just one preset, and we could just pick more at random. And I want to make sure this lock button is on so that it stays on follower mode even if I change presets. Like, that's some cool processing, and if I go to the macro mode, you can hear kind of what this effect is without the envelope follower. Like, there might also be some sweet spots in there, but with the follower on, like, it's just a different thing. I think in a lot of cases, those dynamics help a lot. Here's this pretty standard delay, reverb, transition preset. But if I put it in follower mode, we just get more of an atmosphere on top of our drums. More of a flangery preset here. And with the follower, it's like this. So you just create these vibes, and sometimes they're subtle and sometimes they're extreme, but you know, you could ride the dry wet on that, or you could just use the weird ones for a fill or something. The next tip is more utilitarian, but can be very handy for your mix, and that's making transients spikier. So I did this on my track Burst Generator. I've got this synth arpeggio that was just feeling a little bit dull in my mix, and I couldn't get it to sit right just by changing the volume, and turning up the treble just made it clash with some things. So what I ended up doing is mapping the follower to an EQ, but not frequency like I did in the first example. I just set the EQ to boost the highs a lot, and I mapped the envelope follower to the dry wet. So if we turn Transient off, it sounds like this. And Transient on. Pokes through. You hear those little pokes? I can even blend the overall plugin's dry wet so you can hear the difference back to back. And just to show you, that is different than taking an EQ and just pushing the highs. because you're bringing up more frequencies and you're bringing them up during the sustain of the note rather than just the transients. So just a handy little tip if you want to make some stuff snappier. Tip number, what are we on now? If you've got some reverb or delay and it's a bit muddy, a common technique is to sidechain it to the source that you're reverbing or delaying. So while the sound is playing, you duck the volume of the effects, and then when there's space, the effects come up a bit. Nothing wrong with this. It works a lot of the time. Here's what it sounds like on a vocal. This is from a track I'm working on with Tom McGovern.
Don't know where to go. It's only open road. No one left to tell me what to do.
So you hear some effects on his vocal. I've got the fully wet effects sidechained by his dry vocal, and you can hear in the spaces between the words, the volume's coming up.
It's only open road.
Sometimes this works fine, but sometimes it can sound more natural if you map your envelope follower to some of your effects parameters so that the effects themselves grow when there's space for them. So I'm gonna turn this off. I've got the same transit preset loaded up, but this time instead of the values being static in one spot, I've got it in follower mode, and the delay, tone, and feedback, the chorus, depth, and mix, and the phaser mix, as well as a little bit of filter low cut, are all gonna respond to the dynamics in Tom's singing.
Don't know where to go. It's only open road. No one left to tell me what to do.
So there it feels a little more glued together. You know, you still hear a bit of effect when Tom is singing, but it's less pronounced. And just depending on what you're mixing, sometimes this can be a better solution than just the turn down the volume of the effects approach. Next tip is kind of a variation on this. Instead of using the envelope follower to affect the effects, and instead of using a sidechain, which is essentially an inverted envelope follower, to duck the volume of the effects while the sound is happening, you can use an envelope follower to control the amount of a signal going to an effect. So here's that same vocal with just a standard delay on it.
Don't know where to go. It's only open road. No one left to tell me what to do.
And here it is with the envelope follower trick I'm about to show you.
Don't know where to go. It's only open road. No one left to tell me what to do.
So the second one is softer and subtler. We're not hearing nearly as many of the consonants in Tom's singing. There's just less competing with his main vocal because there's literally less sound in the delay. And so what's happening there is I've got my envelope follower tracking his dry vocal, and that's mapped to a gain control. And I've got a pretty long attack and release on the envelope follower, and I've also dialed it in to the point where the gain is gonna be around 0 for the times when Tom is singing the strongest.
Don't know where to go. It's only open road.
And again, nothing wrong with the first approach. Sometimes that's just what you want. The whole vocal goes to the delay, but this is an option for you. Again, in those times where maybe the mix just isn't really working, where you can clean things up in maybe a more elegant way than just like turning the delay down or filtering it a bunch or, you know, doing the volume duck thing. The next tip is a really fun one. You can map your envelope follower to something on a different track. With the Ableton one, you would go to map mode, and then while that's blinking, you just pick another track and pick a parameter. Could be anything. With Transient, you would switch to sidechain mode, and like I mentioned earlier, a sidechain is just an inverted follower, and then choose whichever source track you want in the sidechain input part of the interface. And in this case, of course, Transient would be on the track that you want to affect. And there are so many applications for this. Like you could have a synth only heard when there's a drum hit. You could put a distortion on your two-bus and then map your kick to its dry wet, and so you get that thing where it's like the speakers are blowing out whenever the kick drum hits. My favorite ever example of this I just discovered by accident, and I put it in my Transit 2 launch video, but I was messing around with distortion and pitch shifting with the envelope follower, and I had this bass and drum loop together. And when I routed the drum loop to affect the bass's distortion and pitch shifting, it turned it into this crazy lead. Lots of fun things to explore here when you have a track affecting another track. The next tip can lead to some really wild sound design. What if you modulate the parameters of your envelope follower while it's doing its envelope following? Let's go back to that drum loop I was using earlier. I've got this preset with a bunch of things on it, but mainly you're gonna hear the delay. So you've got the same drums and the same effect, but then a completely different response based on the envelope follower settings. And then the added layer of it is hearing the motion of those settings changing. It's just like modulation on modulation, which brings me to the next tip. You can leave the envelope follower alone, but you can modulate the parameters that the envelope follower is already modulating. I'm gonna show you that on this track that I'm working on. It's just glitchy drums right now, but I like it. Now here's the Transient preset that I've chosen to put on the whole thing. So distortion, speaker simulation, flanger, the pitch shift is doing the heavy lifting, and then we got an OTT on the end. But I was finding it really fun to change the range of the pitch shift that the envelope follower has to play with. And I can also invert the direction, so louder can either mean pitch shifting up or pitch shifting down. And I'm setting the start and end points of that pitch shift. Or, you know, while you have this kind of envelope follower effect stuff happening, you could blend between the dry and the wet. Like, you can just go wild. Take almost any parameter in your DAW and add envelope follower. You just multiplied your possibilities. Some DAWs have stock envelope followers. Some third-party plugins come with envelope followers, which generally just work on the effect in that plugin. That's why we think Transient's envelope follower is special, because Transient has like 20-something effects in it, so you get all these different flavors that are possible. So check it out if you think that's interesting, but in any case, go and follow some envelopes. I'll see you in the next video. Like it. There's a shape, and that's where the sound can fit in, and then when the shape is down, there's no sound. Everyone knows you can't hear inside an envelope. It's because the sound needs to be mailed to your ears.